I swear to God, this throat is gonna kill me. From this point on, I'm not gonna sound as high-pitched as normal because I was really damn sick to the point where I had to trade my throat for an entire weekend in exchange for not feeling any sort of fever or the burning sensation of going outside. Actually, the latter was a lie, that's every single time. Just a couple of weeks ago, a few people wanted me to talk about Crunchyroll's LGBT panel at Anime Expo. Now, I've called out Crunchyroll years ago for their social justice nonsense, and by years I mean when I still have my white avatar, and that's where I celebrated my 9,000 subscriber video. Jesus Christ, that's a long time ago. It was when the Associate's feature editor wrote an article at Anime Feminist about the fan service comparison between Black Lagoon and Gurren Lagann. A really damn stupid article if you ask me. So if you're one of the many people who subbed to me just recently, I don't blame you for not watching all of my videos and not knowing my opinions on Crunchyroll. In short, I'm not exactly a big fan of them, and even disregarding the social justice nonsense, let's just say that they have a really shady history. So now let's get back to the LGBT panel that they did in Anime Expo. One user asked why you have an LGBT panel, and Crunchyroll's answer is simply because anime is for everyone. You're implying that anime isn't for everyone and that LGBT people are unwelcome in this place, which is not true. The anime fandom welcomes pretty much anyone, regardless of race, gender, or sexuality. This is a rather pointless virtue signaling move. I don't understand why this has to be a thing. It reminds me so much of that time where Xbox splits game developers into different groups based on identities at GDC. Why does that have to be a thing? So that's basically my take if I actually give a damn about the panel at all, which I honestly don't. I'm not gonna go to Crunchyroll and tell them to stop, especially when they already freaking did it. If they want to host it, fine, go ahead and do it. You might disagree about my position, but trust me, I've learned since 2 years ago that butting my heads and arguing with progressives, either individuals or companies, is a waste of time and energy. The best thing that I can do is to inform people about the stupid move, which is why I make these videos. And if it's not video-worthy material, if you haven't followed my Twitter yet, I usually give my takes on smaller articles and opinions on films or movies or games that people will 100% get pissed off at, so follow my Twitter if you want to know more. Since Crunchyroll's LGBT panel is a very small topic, I just leave my discussions and takes on Twitter. Or at least I would. So that panel about LGBT and anime should logically be talking about LGBT anime and representations of LGBT anime characters, right? Wrong. 45 minutes in and you'll be sitting there listening to the staff talking about their personal stories. One of the attendants complained about how there aren't any discussions about LGBTQ anime characters, but instead there are only talks about people's experiences on anime and how those experiences differ when they are part of the LGBT. I have never seen such an embarrassingly pitiful display. Guys, this is a panel where you have a discussion about anime, so talk about anime. If you're gonna have your own LGBT anime panel, fine, but at least talk about LGBT anime instead of your personal stories about how hard it is to live in America, which, to be fair, I can only imagine. It must have been a lot harder living as LGBT in the land of freedom compared to any other countries. You know what, Crunchyroll? Since you don't want to talk about LGBT anime characters, how about I do it for you? This video is going to be me talking about the gays in anime in a manner that doesn't sound like a progressive pushing an agenda and more like someone who has a giant futa dick stuck on his throat. So expect to see pictures of boys kissing at each other, or perhaps an unfortunate prison shower incident. It's been a while since I used that clip actually. And unlike that Crunchyroll panel, this one is actually going to be talking about the anime, and it's also going to be very much free. At least assuming that Crunchyroll's panel is not free, which in that case you freaking hack. But going to Anime Expo certainly isn't free, and you don't have to pay for anything to see my videos. But if for some reason you want to pay for my contribution to this conversation, which is precisely zero, I have a PayPal and Patreon for that, link down below. Incidentally, huge thanks to Austin for the pledge, you are fantastic. Now remember when I say that anime is a welcoming space for everyone? Well, that comes in its own asterisk as well. We welcome people who enjoy animes and want to talk about animes. We do not welcome people who want to divide the community, which is one of the criticisms that the Crunchyroll panel had. If you want to get to the anime community, all you need to do is watch anime, love anime, and talk about anime with people. Nothing else matters in that conversation. You can make new friends and perhaps find love as well. If you're gonna split people based on their arbitrary characteristics and spend 45 minutes talking about your life experiences in a panel that should have been about animes, you'll only come off as entitled, narcissistic, and egotistical. So in order for you to love anime, you need to find a genre that works for you. There are thousands of anime in the world and every genre works for different people. Otherwise, you'd be stuck in the impression that anime is just about moe or it's just about edgy teenagers being edgy. It's pretty much the same to video games actually. Video games are welcoming for everybody, but not every genre will appeal to everybody. So with anime, the genre that appeals to most people would be action-oriented anime. Typical shonen anime, which means anime directed to boys like My Hero Academia, academia will have a more mainstream appeal. Contrary to what people might say, there's really nothing wrong trying to appeal to the mainstream, because that's where the big bucks will be made, and the anime industry really needs the big bucks. That's precisely why the anime industry don't really bother spending money producing anime with a more niche appeal, and one of those niche is without a doubt anime about LGBT people. Now, this isn't saying that anime with LGBT people has never been successful yet, because there are quite a lot of anime with LGBT people that are successful. Revolutionary Girl Utena is a very good example. Two of the biggest, most recent examples for me would be Yuri on Ice and Kobayashi's Dragon Maid, both spawning a good number of fans while having entertaining animes with characters that are part of the spectrum. But these are very rare occasions, and even then, the LGBT characters had to rely on other stories as a foundation, like how Yuri on Ice still need to have the ice skating sports drama. But we're not really talking about that. We're talking about animes that are the equivalent of Brokeback Mountain, a movie about gay people that won tons of awards and topped the box office. Unfortunately, there isn't really one. Once again, it's because being gay is just a really niche thing that will only appeal to a very specific group of people. That and Japan's view of homosexuality is not exactly as liberal as the West. It's not a legit form of sexuality. They view homosexuality as a fetish, and specific fetishes will never become profitable and mainstream. So as you can already tell, that queer stories are very niche, and it rarely if ever goes mainstream. This really doesn't please the progressives, to the point where the community is so freaking desperate they decided to make the characters that are not really part of the LGBT spectrum to actually be part of the LGBT spectrum. For example, Kino from Kino's Journey is actually non-binary, as one horrendously misinformed Anime News Network article says. More details on that in another video. And of course, the classic example of Naoto Shirogane from Persona 4, which I talk about so much in this channel. She should have been my assistant at this time. I mean, come on, we both wear blues and want to seek the truth. We would have been absolutely great partners. Emphasis on work partners, because I don't want to be beat up by any of her boyfriends. But just because anime LGBT stories are not mainstream, that doesn't mean that they don't exist. Other than the animes I mentioned previously, LGBT love stories exist in the realms of doujins, and since most doujins are not always restricted to copyright law, they also tend to feature your favorite characters from other more popular franchises. In other words, they are fan works, and honestly, that's where the LGBT stories thrive the most. And when I say LGBT stories, I mean yaois and yuris, obviously. Do you classify futa or trap stories as yaoi or yuri? Anyway, the point is, these yaoi/yuri stories don't thrive in animes, they thrive in fan works, because the fans aren't interested in making money, they're just interested in jerking off the boys. So understandably, people who are not familiar with the culture of LGBT love stories like yaois or yuris, or perhaps anime in general, are of course going to do the rookie mistake of looking at yaois in the anime department, only to find out that the quality of yaoi/yuri anime always range from a bland but functional sandwich to a giant big pile of Dynapoo. One of the good examples of these rookie errors is made by someone from fandom, which is quite ironic. Here's an article that one of my viewers sent to me quite a while ago that talks about these yaoi animes, perhaps in a manner that is a bit too over the top, like claiming that it's hurting the LGBT community, which is really odd. I don't know how a subgenre of anime that isn't really popular and isn't really that good anyway hurts the LGBT community. It's like saying that throwing a ping pong ball to a building hurts its foundation and structure. I mean, come on guys, do you really have to go to something that is so incredibly niche and not a lot of people like anyway? Are you seriously going to say that it's problematic? In the anime love stage, Izumi and Ryoma are two star-crossed lovers. Thanks to a cross-dressing mishap, handsome celebrity Ryoma discovers his childhood crush Izumi is actually a boy. When he realizes he has feelings for another man, Ryoma goes to Izumi's house to confront him, forces Izumi to undress, and ultimately tries to rape him. That's another thing that I notice about yaoi doujins. There's quite a lot of yaoi doujins that involve rape. One of the most famous phrases among the yaoi genre is "stop, my ass hurts." I guess that's what happens when you're in the prison shower. One of the doujins that I read was about a trap who quite literally traps a guy into thinking that the trap is a girl. Now before you say that this paints a horrendous portrayal of the trans people, this obviously isn't a representation of them. This is just what happens in the story, and it just so happens that people really like this sort of thing. In other words, porn fetishes are merely fantasies. Otherwise, the horny girls would start finding ways to summon Cthulhu and find ways to get its tentacles to their sensitive regions. However, a typical hentai or doujin plot doesn't always translate very well in a more serious medium like anime, the same way a typical porn plot doesn't always translate well into the movies. 50 Shades. It works perfectly fine in hentai because hentai is all about the sex and the fetishes, but anime is a more serious medium than hentai. In anime, people want to see the chemistry building up between the characters, rather than seeing a poorly made love story that doesn't actually go anywhere. Scum squish. which incidentally is also another anime with an LGBT character. This is perhaps why a lot of yaoi animes don't always work. They always take elements from their doujin counterparts and slap it all together, expecting results, instead of actually making a love story. Love is a lot more complicated than sex. The relationships between two individuals are incredibly delicate and interesting to explore, which is why I find romance to be one of the more interesting genres, because human relationships are interesting and complicating topics. Jesus Christ, my monotonous voice and my desire to find out what love is makes me starting to sound like Violet.
It's an incredibly shocking scene for an anime that promotes itself as a saccharine, sweet love story. Nothing in the pink and flowery opening title sequence or key art implies that Love Stage is a story about sexual abuse.
Oh, writer, you sweet, sweet innocent child, you have been deceived by the dastardly cunning trickery that is misleading anime intros, a trope that is exploited only about a billion times.
Anime fans are well aware of how prevalent tropes are. They're in every anime from Dragon Ball Z to My Hero Academia to Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime tropes can be benign, like high school students running with toast in their mouth. Oftentimes, they're somewhat problematic fan service, like magical girl costume changes.
I want you to please elaborate on that somewhat problematic statement, writer. I want you to do it, but we'll be wasting our time. So how about we focus on how yaoi anime hurts gay people instead? Trope 1. Older man with much younger guy.
One of the most obvious and apparent tropes in boys' love shows are that the main couple have a substantial age difference. There's always a distinct seme, top, and uke bottom in the relationships, which creates a distinct power dynamic. There's nothing inherently wrong with this, but in boys' love anime, the uke character is often presented as very young. They may technically be an adult or likely a teen, but they have the body of an early pubescent boy. This is often spelled out clearly that this 16-year-old boy looks like a 12-year-old.
I don't know about you, writer, but there is a distinct difference between a 16-year-old and a 12-year-old. And the screenshot that they show of this early pubescent boy looks exactly how 16-year-old boy looks like in pretty much every anime ever. The moment you call this boy looking like a 12-year-old is exactly the moment I know that you're not an anime fan. You're a normie looking at things in a normie lens.
There's a damaging and untrue stereotype that gay men are predators on the prowl for younger boys. The term
Wait, stop. That actually happens, writer. It's not the majority, but that actually happens. They are gay men who are predators and they prowl for younger boys. It's a thing. Granted, it doesn't happen as often now, and there are still people who believe that this is what every gay people would do, but not in most Western countries, and especially not in 2018.
It also reinforces the intrinsically misogynistic stereotype that the bottom in a gay relationship is the woman. The uke character is frail, too weak to resist the advances of his seme. He is almost always soft-skinned, effeminate, and sometimes even voiced by a woman. In addition to this being an extremely narrow and increasingly incorrect portrayal of gay dynamics,
Okay, I get what you're saying. You're basically saying that the masculine half, which is seme, is always dominant to the feminine half, which is uke. Writer, these anime that you cited aren't about portraying how gay people are in real life. They are about fetishizing gay people and making them things for the yaoi fans, aka Fujoshis, to fap to. It just so happened that Fujoshis really love this sort of trope, and this is the sort of trope that make yaois work. But don't worry, writer, if your complaint is that yaois always fall down to the typical uke/seme trope, you are in luck, because there are quite a lot of doujins where the roles are pretty dynamic. There are even some doujins that depict the relationship in a more realistic manner. Imagine that, doujins having more realistic portrayals of relationships than actual anime. Anyway, moving on to trope 2, sexual assault.
Look, if your romance story starts with attempted rape, you're telling a very crappy love story.
I agree, which is why yaoi anime sucks. At least doujins are just about the sex, and even then there are doujins with infinitely better story, more realistic portrayals of relationship, and more dynamic roles for the two parties concerned. This isn't really a yaoi doujin, but I do recommend Emergence by Shindle. Going back to the article, I mostly agree with this part because it's the writer talking about how rape is not going to lead into a good romance story. Again, writer, all of this can be explained because of yaoi stories coming off of doujins and yaoi anime trying to just slap the doujin story and expect it to work as a love story. A lot of the dumb and unrealistic plot elements in doujins are acceptable because they are just wank materials in the end, but anime requires a little bit more seriousness, something that a lot of yaoi animes don't really do, to be honest. The writer oddly enough cited a study showing that only 4% of sexual assault victims in Japan actually report the crime to the police. This is so unbelievably off topic. We're still talking about anime here, right? Moving on to trope 3, the main characters aren't really gay. And yes, this happens quite a lot in anime too, where the main character is is not really gay and rarely identify as anything but straight. The writer cited one character from One Punch Man who is a gay stereotype character that is a combination of hypermasculinity and flowery femininity. He's also a serial rapist because— wait, serial rapist? Where did that come from? Well, according to his character page at TV Tropes, it's an implication in what he does to other inmates, although he'll just let them off with a French kiss. I must have missed that, mostly because a lot of his scenes are played for laughs. Anyway, moving on from that, the writer's main point on his critique is that with this trope of characters not actually being gay, that results in gay relationships not being normalized. This is once again one of the many attempts of progressives being unable to accept the hard truth that being part of the LGBT is just not normal in Japan, and LGBT stories are only gonna drop into the niche market. You can't make something that people consider to be fetish in there and attempt to normalize them. If you want to see gay relationships being normalized, I suggest you to go to the doujins. But be warned, this is also the same place where monster girl relationships are also normalized. Trope 4. Main character is traumatized or broken. I find it interesting that the writer claims that gay people aren't broken in the same article where the writer talks about how the portrayal of gay people in yaoi anime hurts the LGBT community. You can't say that gay people aren't broken when in the same article you talk about how an unpopular subgenre of anime harms the LGBT community. That's like if the building plays victim by saying that it's being hurt by the ping pong balls. That implies that gay people are so broken that niche and unpopular anime subgenres can actually break them. Someone has a very low expectation of gay people. What I find quite baffling is the writer associating tragic backstories and relating it to a factor of homosexuality. So the writer's main point in the segment is by making the characters stunted, broken, or traumatized, it gives the impression that being gay is not normal. Wait, what? Where did you get that leap of logic, writer? Characters being stunted, broken, or traumatized is every character in anime ever made ever. I would also even stretch it that every human being is stunted, broken, or traumatized in some ways. Also, did you just assume that people think gay people are gay because they have a tragic backstory? So not only you have low expectations of straight people, you also have low expectations of gay people as well. We have a soft bigot double entendre here. So what can we do? Well, stop watching crappy boys love anime and start reading doujins and fanfictions. That's my solution at least, but the writer has one.
I wish I had a solution to this issue, but when it comes to anime, we as a Western audience have very little pull.
At one side, okay, so the writer doesn't have any sorts of solutions to combat it, but on the other,
But what we can start to do is to stop excusing this and other overtly problematic tropes. All too often when issues with anime are brought up, the answer is a general shrug of, well, Japan is a different culture. I think this excuse doesn't deserve it to us. And Japan, it's insulting to Japanese people to claim that negative stereotypes are part of their culture, as if homophobia is a time-honored tradition up there with shogi or kendo.
Okay, writer, slow down. I'm very sure I said that Japan considered yaoi/yuri a fetish instead of a legit sexuality. Even Japanese people see this as weird and makes zero sense. Let me spell it out to you, writer, by clapping at every word. Fetishes don't have to make sense.
With American companies like Crunchyroll and Netflix bringing anime en masse to the States, we need to be more particular about what messages we're promoting. It's important that young people, gay youth especially, have positive and realistic portrayals in media. Growing up, it's all too easy to think there's something wrong with you, and if you're watching anime that reinforces this thought, it can damage you at a very formative time in your life.
Implying that young gay people only learn about homosexuality through fiction and that they don't have good parents that can teach them about the values of life, including homosexuality. So you have a low expectation towards straight people and several low expectations towards gay people. Jesus Christ, writer.
Now it's not all bad. While Shonen Ai is a flaming garbage pile, there have been notable examples of positive gay representation in anime and manga. While not overtly gay, Yuri on Ice takes the common tropes of sports anime's latent homoeroticism and uses it to tell a love story on top of the broader sports plot.
Okay, writer, your standard of not overtly gay should be cross-examined and analyzed for further research because Yuri on Ice contains two characters freaking kissing each other at episode 7. How much gay do you need? A freaking anal sex? To be fair, this scene is actually left ambiguous to the viewers in whether or not Victor actually kissed Yuri, and the creators apparently face censorship if they want to depict a direct kiss. But since the creator actually intended this to be a kiss, and since pretty much everyone who looked at the scene accepted it as such, this might as well be a kiss. And that's where fan edits come in and actually make it through. Hooray for the power of Fujoshis. And even if that scene wasn't a kiss, this scene This scene. This scene, this scene, this scene, this scene. I can go on and on and on. I know that progressives suffer from this common disease of not seeing the source material that they're talking about, but this isn't even trying.
Hopefully in time, we'll see anime continue its trend towards more accepting and thoughtful portrayals of all kinds of people, but before we can get there, things like shonenai's rape culture storylines need to go.
No, writer, that should not be an advice that you give to yaoi animes that you cited. You should have given them the advice, for the love of God, don't be absolute garbage. We need more boys' love stories that are actually good, and it's nice that you included an article where you recommended a bunch of LGBT anime. Props to recommending them to people, but that doesn't mean that the ideas being presented here are just as good. To put this long-ass panel short, anime that is related to LGBT stuff is not popular and doesn't bring a lot of money, which is why Japan doesn't make them that much. But that doesn't mean that they don't exist, and it doesn't mean that there isn't a smaller niche market for them. Sure, their stories are fetishistic and wasn't actually that great, but that's not where the genre thrives. The genre thrives more on fan works, mostly drawn by a bunch of horny fujoshis. There, Crunchyroll, we had a discussion about LGBT characters in anime and LGBT animes in general. If this is still way too hard for you, then perhaps a discussion about anime piracy would be a great hit.